Balaam extols Israel. Balaam now turned back to Balak, who waited for him with his princes. He now wanted to curse Israel, but his mouth, far from being able to utter the words, was on the contrary compelled to praise and bless Israel. He said, I found myself on the high places, in company with the patriarchs, and you, Balak, have cast me down from the heights. Through you I have lost my gift of prophecy. Both of us are ungrateful men if we wish to undertake evil against Israel. For, had it not been for their father Abraham, for whose sake God saved Lot out of the ruins of the city, there should be no Balak, for you are one of Lot's descendants. And had it not been for Jacob, I, Laban's descendant, would not now be on earth, for no sons were born to Laban until after Jacob had come into his house. You brought me out of Aram to curse Israel, but it was this land that their father Abraham left laden with blessings, and it was this land also that their father Jacob entered, laden with blessings. Will now a curse come on them from this land? How can I curse them, if he who curses them brings a curse on himself? You, moreover, wish me even to curse Jacob. Had you urged me to curse a nation that was only the descendants of Abraham or of Isaac, I might have been able to do so. But to curse Jacob's descendants is as bad if a man were to come to a king and say, the crown you wear is worthless. Would such a man be permitted to live? The Lord's portion is his people. Jacob is the lot of his inheritance. In Israel, said the Lord, will I be glorified. How can I curse those who God has not cursed? Even when they have been worthy of a curse, they have not been cursed. When Jacob went in to receive the blessing, he went in through craft, and said to his father, I am Esau, your firstborn. Does not he deserve a curse, out of whose mouth issues a lie? Yet, far from being cursed, he was blessed. Ordinarily, a legion that stirs up sedition against their king is declared guilty by death. But Israel denied God, saying, These be your gods, O Israel. Should they not then have been destroyed? God, however, did not even at that moment withdraw his love from them, but left to them the clouds of glory, manna, and the well, even after they had adored the calf. As often as they sinned and God threatened them with a curse, still he did not say he would bring it on them, whereas in his promises of blessings he always tells them that he himself would send them on Israel. How can I curse when God blesses and does not curse? Israel is a nation who God thought of even before the creation of the world. It is the rock on which the world is founded. For when God was considering the creation, he thought, how can I create a world if the idolatrous generation of Enosh and the generation of the flood will arouse my anger? He was about to desist from the creation of the world when he saw before him Abraham's form, and he said, Now I have a rock on which I can build, one on which I can found the world. How, too, can I curse a nation that is protected and surrounded by the merits of the patriarchs and the wives of the patriarchs, as if by lofty mountains and steep hills, so that if Israel sins, God forgives them as soon as Moses prays for them, asking God to be mindful of the patriarchs? I was in error when I believed Israel could be easily attacked, but now I know that they have taken deep root in the earth and cannot be uprooted. God forgives them many sins, out of consideration for their having preserved the token of the Abrahamic covenant. And as powerless as I am to curse them alone, just as powerless am I to curse them together with another nation. For it is a people that dwell alone, and will not be reckoned among the nations. Israel is distinguished from all other nations by their customs, by their food, by the token of the covenant on their bodies, and by the token on their doorposts. So God does not judge them at the same time with the other nations, for he judges the latter in the darkness of the night, but the former in bright daylight. Israel is a separate people. Alone they enjoy the blessing God gives them, and no other nation rejoices with Israel. So too in the Messianic time, Israel will quite alone rejoice in delights and pleasures, whereas in the present world it may also partake of the universal welfare of the nations. I am not able to accomplish anything against a nation that zealously fulfills God's commandments, and that owes its existence to the devotion with which the wives of the patriarchs obeyed the commandments of God. Let me die the death of the righteous, and let my end be like his. Balaam in these words spoke an unconscious prophecy, to wit, that he should be entitled to participate in the fate of the righteous and share in the future world, if he died the death of the righteous, a natural death, but not otherwise. He died, however, a violent death, and thus lost his share in the future world. Balaam's hopes disappointed. When Balak saw that Balaam, instead of cursing, praised and exalted Israel, he led him to the top of Pisgah, hoping that he might there succeed in cursing Israel. By means of his sorcery, Balak had discovered that Pisgah was to be a place of misfortune for Israel. Hence he thought that there Balaam could curse Israel. He was, however, mistaken. The disaster that awaited Israel there was the death of their leader Moses, and God refused to grant Balaam's wish on this spot also. God indeed appeared to Balaam, but what he said to him was, "Go again to Balak and bless Israel." Balaam now did not wish to return to Balak at all and disappoint him a second time. But God compelled him to return to Balak and communicate to him the blessings of Israel. So Balaam now turned back to Balak, who he found standing by his burnt offering. But whereas on the first occasion the king had awaited Balaam surrounded by his princes, Balaam now saw only a few notables surrounding Balak. Most of the princes had deserted their king without waiting for Balaam, for they expected nothing further from him after the first disappointment he had caused them. Balak did not now receive him kindly, but mockingly, and asked, "So what has the Lord spoken?" hinting in this way that Balaam was unable to say what he wished, but only what God willed. Balaam replied to these scornful words, "Rise up, Balak, you may not be seated when God's words are spoken. God is not like a man of flesh and blood that makes friends and disowns them as soon as he finds someone better. God is not so, and he does not cancel the vow he made to the patriarchs, for he promised to bestow Canaan on their descendants, and he fulfills his promises. He always fulfills what he has promised to Israel, but allows the evil which he threatens them to be unfulfilled as soon as they repent from their sins. God does not see their sins, but he does see their good deeds. You, Balak, say to me, 'Come, curse Jacob for me.' But a thief can enter a vineyard that has a keeper only if the keeper sleeps. But he that keeps Israel never sleeps nor slumbers. So how can I enter their vineyard? If, however, you think I cannot harm Israel on account of Moses, who is their keeper, know then that his successor will be just as invincible, for through the sounds of trumpets he will overthrow the walls of Jericho. You, Balak, say, 'A people has gone forth out of Egypt.' But they have not only gone forth, but God himself brought them out of Egypt, who combines in himself the powers of the angels and of the invisible demons. Swift as the flight of a bird does fortune as well as misfortune come on Israel. If they sin, God suddenly plunges them down. But if they act well in the sight of the Lord, God exalts them as quickly as a cloud. You, Balak, have repeatedly tried to discover a spot where you can work harm on them. But they have nothing to do with sorceries. They baffle and put to nothing the sorceries and prophecies of the other nations by their pious deeds. When they set forth into battle, they practice no magic, but the high priest, clad in the Urim and Thummim, consults God about the outcome of the battle. There will even be a time when Israel will sit before the Lord like a pupil before his master, and will receive the revelation of the secrets of the Torah, so that even the angels will consult Israel concerning the secrets revealed. For the angels are not permitted to approach God as closely as the Israelites in the Messianic time. There is not on the whole earth another nation like Israel. The last thing they do before going to sleep is to devote themselves to the study of the Torah and the fulfillment of its laws. and this is also their first occupation in the morning. As soon as they arise, they recite the Shema and adore God, and not until after they have done this do they go about their business. If evil spirits come to attack them or disaster threatens them, they worship their God, and as soon as they utter the words, "The Lord our God is one Lord," the harmful spirits become powerless against them and whisper after them the words, "Praised be the name of the glory of his kingdom, forever and ever." When at night they retire, they again recite the Shema. Then the angels of the day pass on the trust of guarding them to the angels of the night. And when on awakening they again worship the Lord, the angels of the night pass them on to be guarded by the angels of the day. When Balak for the second time saw that Balaam, instead of cursing, blessed Israel, he brought him to the top of Peor, thinking that perhaps it would please God to have him curse him from there. For by his sorcery, Balak had discovered that a great disaster was to fall on Israel on the top of Peor, and thought that this disaster might be their curse from Balaam. He was, however, mistaken in this supposition, for the disaster on that spot was none other than Israel's sins with the daughters of Moab, and God's punishment for these sins. Curses turn to blessings. Balaam, on the other hand, made no further attempts to induce God to curse Israel, but thought he might be able to bring misfortune on Israel by enumerating the sins they had committed in the desert, and in this way to conjure up God's wrath against them. But the desert had also been the place where Israel had accepted the Torah, hence the mention of the desert called up God's love instead of his wrath. Balaam himself, when he let his eyes wander over the camp of Israel, and perceived how their tents were so pitched that no one might see what was going on in the homes of the others, found himself compelled to burst into praises of Israel. And under the inspiration of the prophetic spirit, the curses he had intended to speak were changed in his mouth into blessings, and he spoke of the extent and importance of the kingdom of Israel. But whereas Moses blessed his people with a low, quiet voice, Balaam spoke his words of blessing in a very loud voice, so that all the other nations might hear, and out of envy make war on Israel. Balaam's blessings were therefore accounted to him not as blessings, but as curses. God said, "I have promised Abraham, I will bless them that bless you, and curse him that curses you. So I will account Balaam's blessings as curses, and, indeed, all of Balaam's blessings later turned to curses, except his blessing that houses of teaching and prayer should never be missing among Israel." The words that Balaam announced were heard by all the inhabitants of the earth. Such power did God lend to his voice. For he knew that at some future time there would be a man born of woman who would pass himself off for a god, and would mislead all the world. So God permitted all the world to hear Balaam's words that said, "God is not a man, and the man that passes himself off for God lies. But he that will mislead the world by declaring that he will disappear for a time, and then reappear, will promise what he can never fulfill. Woe then to that nation that will lend ear to the man who passes himself off for God." Balaam furthermore announced the events that would come to pass at the time of David's kingship, and also what will happen at the end of days, in the time of the Messiah, when Rome and all the other nations will be destroyed by Israel, excepting only the descendants of Jethro, who participate in Israel's joy and sorrows. Yes, the Kenites are to be the ones who announce to Israel the arrival of the Messiah, and the sons of Kenite, Jonadab, are to be the first at the time of the Messiah to bring offerings at the temple, and to announce to Jerusalem its deliverance. This was Balaam's last prophecy. After this, the prophetic spirit left him, and God in this way granted Moses' wish to reserve the gift of prophecy as a special distinction to Israel. Balaam was the last prophet of the nations. Balaam's wicked counsel. Although Balaam had not been able to fulfill Balak's wish and curse Israel, still he did not leave him before giving him advice as to how he might bring Israel to ruin, saying, "The God of this people hates unchastity, but they are very eager to possess linen garments. Pitch tents then, and at their entrances have old women offer these articles for sale. Induce them in this way to enter the interior of the tents, where they will be surprised by young harlots, who will seduce them, so that God may punish them for their sin. As the old saying goes, throw the stick up in the air and it will always return to its original place. The Moabite nation that owes its existence to the illegal relations of Lot with his daughter could not deny its origin, and followed Balaam's counsel to tempt Israel to unchastity. They pitched tents, filled them with pretty women, whom they provided with valuable things, and had old women take up their posts at the doors of the tents, whose task it was to lure the passing Israelites into the interior. If an Israelite passed, the old woman at the entrance of the tent would thus address him: "Would you like to buy linen garments that were made in Beth-shan?" Then they would show him a sample of the goods and name the price, and finally add, "Go within, and you will see linen still more beautiful." If he went in, he was received by a young woman who was richly adorned and perfumed, who would at first set for him a price much lower than the value of the goods, and then invite him to do as if he were at home and to choose the article he liked best. While he sat there, he was treated with wine, and the young woman invited him to drink with the words, "Why do we love you while you hate us? Are we not all descendants of one man? Was not Terah our ancestor as much as yours? If you will not eat of our sacrifices or what we have cooked, here are calves and fowl that you may slaughter in accordance with your law." But as soon as the Israelite had allowed himself to be persuaded to drink, he was absolutely in the hands of the shameless woman. Intoxicated with wine, his passion for the woman was soon kindled, but she agreed to satisfy his desire only after he had first worshipped Peor, the god of the Moabites. Now, the worship of this idol consisted in nothing else than the complete baring of the body, so the Israelites, seeing no evil in it, declared themselves willing to follow the summons of the Moabite women. And in this way they were seduced both to unchastity and to idolatry. At first the men were ashamed and committed this whoredom with the Moabite women in secret, but they soon lost this feeling of shame and took themselves two by two to their lewd actions. Israel's moral degradation is partly to be explained by this, that the place where they found themselves was apt to tempt them to lewdness. For there are springs whose water have various effects on those who partake of them. One kind of water strengthens, another weakens. One makes beautiful, another makes ugly. One makes chaste, another brings about lewdness. Now there was in Shittim, where the Israelites then lived, the well of lewdness, out of which the inhabitants of Sodom had fetched their water, but from which, since the destruction of the sinful cities, no one had drunk, and for this reason the people had until then been chaste. But Israel, as soon as they tasted of this water, gave up their chaste manner of life. This disastrous spring will lose its force only in the Messianic time, when God will cause it to dry up. Phinehas, zealous for God. When the people's shamelessness became more and more widespread, God commanded Moses to appoint judges to punish the sinners, and as it was difficult to discover these through the agency of witnesses, God marked them by causing the cloud of glory that lay spread over the camp of Israel to disappear from the sinners. Those who were not covered by the cloud of glory were thus marked as sinners. God appointed as judges and executioners 8,600 officers of the people, giving them the order that each of them execute 2 sinners. They carried out Moses' command and stoned the sinners, whose corpses then hung on the gallows for a few minutes. This was the legal punishment, for these sinners had not only committed whoredom with the women of Moab, but had worshipped the Moabite idol Peor, and idolatry is punishable with death by stoning. While the judges administered their stern sentences, the tribe of Simon approached their prince Zimri and said to him, "People are being executed, and you sit still as if nothing were going on." He then took 24,000 men and went to Cosbi, Balak's daughter, and without considering men or God, he requested her in the presence of many people to yield herself to him, to satisfy his evil desires. Now Balak had ordered his daughter Cazbi to employ her beauty only for the sake of enticing Moses, thinking, "Whatever evil may be decreed by God against Israel will not harm Moses. But if my daughter should seduce him to sin, then all Israel will be in my hand." Hence Cazbi said to Zimri, "My father ordered me to be obedient to the wishes of Moses alone, for he is a king, and so is my father, and a king's daughter is fit for none but a king." Zimri, however, replied, "I am a greater man than Moses, for he is chief only of the third tribe of Israel, whereas I am prince of the tribe of Simon, the second of the Israelite tribes. And if you will, I will convince you that I am a greater man than Moses, for I will take you to myself in his presence, without paying attention to his prohibition." Zimri then seized Cazbi by the locks of her hair and brought her before Moses, who he then addressed as follows: "Tell me, son of Amram, is this woman permitted me, or is she forbidden me?" Moses said, "She is forbidden to you." Zimri answered, "Are you really the faithful expounder of the Torah, whose reliability God praised with the words, 'He is faithful in all my house'? How then can you assert that she is forbidden me? For then your wife would be forbidden to you, for she is a Midianite like this woman, and this one is a noble woman of a noble family, whereas your wife is the daughter of an idolatrous priest." At those words, Moses, Eleazar, and the elders began to weep, for they did not know how to answer Zimri's insolent words, nor what they could do to restrain this sinner from accomplishing his sin. God said to Moses, "Where is your wisdom? You needed to utter only one word, and Korah and all his company were swallowed by the earth. Can't you now do something better than to weep?" The Holy Spirit exclaimed, at Moses' perplexity and silence, "The stout-hearted are spoiled. They have slept their sleep." God, who calls the pious to strict account, punished Moses for the lack of decision that he displayed on this occasion, by leaving his burial place unknown to mankind. While Moses and the other pious men were irresolute and deliberated whether or not Zimri deserved death, Phinehas said to Moses, "O my great uncle, did you not teach me, when you returned from Mount Sinai, that it is the zealot's task for the sake of God's law to slay those who commit unchastity with non-Jewish women?" Phinehas took the liberty of pointing out the law to his teacher Moses, who had forbidden it, because, when God's name is profaned, no man should consider the respect due to a teacher. Therefore, Phinehas now thought only of establishing God's law, and in doing this it was necessary to recall it to Moses. Moses, indeed, did not take it amiss, but he said to Phinehas, "Let the reader of the letter be its bearer also," words by which he called on Phinehas himself to visit punishment on the sinners. Phinehas was now for a time in doubt whether he should dare to punish the sinners, for it was to be expected that he would eventually meet his death in this matter, being 1 against 2, Zimri and his mistress Korbi. When, however, the plague that God had sent on Israel on account of their sins spread more and more rapidly, Phinehas determined to risk his life in trying to kill the sinners. For, he said to himself, "The horse goes willingly into battle, and is ready to be killed only to be of service to its master. How much more does it behoove me to expose myself to death in order to sanctify God's name?" He found himself all the more impelled to act so because he could not well leave the punishment of the sinners to others. He said, "The tribe of Reuben can do nothing in this instance, because their grandfather Reuben was himself suspected of an unchaste action. Nothing is to be expected from the tribe of Simon, for it follows the sinful example of its prince, Zimri. The tribe of Judah cannot well be of use in this matter, because their grandfather Judah committed unchastity with his daughter-in-law, Tamar. Moses himself is doomed to impotence, because his wife Zipporah is a Midianite woman. Hence there remains nothing but for me to interpose." 12 Miracles. Phinehas, now prepared at the risk of his own life to punish Zimri for his sin, left the house of teaching, where he had until now debated the case of Zimri with Moses and all the other pious men, and then had to provide himself with a lance, not having one with him because no armed man may enter a house of teaching. That his weapon might not betray him, he detached the upper iron part of the lance and hid it in his bosom, and then leaned on the wooden shaft as if it were a staff. When he reached the house, where Zimri and Cozbi were giving extravagant play to their passions, the people said to him, "Where are you going, and why?" He replied, "Do you not know that the tribe of Levi is always to be found where the house of Simon is?" Then they permitted him to enter the house, but said, "It seems now that even the Pharisees permit intercourse with the heathen women." But when Phinehas had entered, he drew his lance and thrust both of them through the belly, the man of Israel and the woman. Phinehas' fear that these two might attack him was not realized, for God performed no less than 12 miracles for Phinehas, which not only made it impossible for the sinners to attack him, but also showed the people that his action found favor in the sight of the Lord. The first miracle was that an angel would not allow the sinful couple to separate when Phinehas surprised them. The second miracle was that the angels stopped their mouths so they could not cry out for help. The third miracle was that the lance struck the man and the woman's pudenda. The fourth miracle was that the upper iron part of the lance extended, so that Phinehas could at one thrust pierce the man as well as the woman. The fifth miracle was that Phinehas's arm was sufficiently strong to lift both on the point of his lance. The sixth miracle was that the wooden shaft of the lance sustained the weight of both people. The seventh was that the two bodies remained poised on the lance and did not fall off. The eighth was that the angel turned the shameless pair around, so that all might see that Phinehas had surprised them in the act. The ninth miracle was that no blood flowed from them, although they had been thrust through, or else Phinehas would have been polluted. The 10th was that the shameless couple did not give up the ghosts so long as Phinehas bore them on the point of his lance, as he would otherwise have been polluted by their corpses. The 11th was that the angel raised the doorposts of the room so Phinehas might pass through with the sinners on the point of his lance. And the 12th miracle was that when the tribe of Simon prepared to avenge Zimri's death on Phinehas, the angel sent a plague on them, so that they were impotent against him. Phinehas was not, however, content with having punished the sinners, but tried also to reconcile God with Israel. He threw the two bodies on the ground, saying to God, "Why have you, on account of the sins of these two, slain 24,000 Israelites?" For this was the number snatched away by the plague that God had sent on Israel for their sins. The angels now wanted to plunge Phinehas into death for his bold words, but God told him to desist, saying, "Leave him in peace. He is a zealot, the son of a zealot, an appeaser of wrath, and the son of an appeaser of wrath." Next, Phinehas rewarded. End part 68 of 95, TheLegendsOfTheJews.com.